Dear friends, not long ago there was a terribly heartbreaking case that went to court. It was a case that involved wife sharing, where a few husbands took turns to sedate their own wives and then invited other men to rape them in their sleep. Repugnant and vile would be understatements to describe this crime. It is heart-wrenching to think of the pain caused to the victims and the intense sense of betrayal they must have felt at the hands of their own husbands. So, reactions to the case were swift and furious, beastly, monstrous, abominable. These were words used by many to describe the crime, and understandably so. However, an opinion piece in a local newspaper which caught my attention referred to the case as an expression of toxic masculinity. Now, based on this reading, masculinity is used to dominate and use, even abuse, our female counterparts for the man's gratification. Is masculinity really toxic, I asked myself? I guess to answer this question, we need to ask ourselves, what is masculinity in the first place? Various dictionaries have defined it as the characteristics that are traditionally thought to be typical of men. The problem we find in this definition is what is typical. As we know, this can vary according to culture and time. So, what we do need is a definition of masculinity that is clear, consistent, and unchanging, regardless of culture and time. One such definition would be that masculinity merely refers to the fact of being a man, as referenced somewhat in the Oxford Dictionary. So masculinity simply refers to our maleness and how we express it in and through our male bodies. Similarly, femininity refers to a girl or woman's femaleness and how she expresses it in and through her female body. Obviously, there are so many varied yet different ways of expressing our masculinity, right? Some men are more gentle than others. Some are more aggressive than others. Some take more risks than others. Others are totally averse to risk-taking. Some are more interested in the arts than the sciences. Some are more interested in certain sports, while others are totally averse to it, or at least have no interest in it. But the fact remains that no matter how we may express our maleness, our masculinity, we nevertheless will always remain male. Because that is how we are created, that is our nature, and that is something that factually cannot be changed. And there's a reason for this, which leads us to the next question. What is masculinity made for? To find the answer, we turn to our Creator himself. To discover who we are as man and woman, and thus masculinity and femininity, Jesus points us to God's original plan for us from the beginning, as we'll find in Matthew chapter 19. And that brings us all the way back to Genesis, where we are told that God made man, male and female, in His own image. What image is that? Since God is love, that would mean we are made in love, for love, to love. We will therefore find fulfillment only when we love as God loves, by being a sincere gift to others. And since we are made in the image and likeness of the Holy Trinity, we are made for fruitful, life-giving communion. And now guess what? God wanted to make His plan so obvious that He created our bodies, male and female. While both men and women are absolutely equal in dignity, their distinct complementarity and reciprocity makes possible life-giving communion through the mutual and total bodily gift of each to the other. As Pope St. John Paul II said, the body which expresses femininity for masculinity and vice versa, masculinity for femininity, manifests the reciprocity and the communion of persons. It expresses it through gift as the fundamental characteristic of personal existence. Masculinity, femininity, namely sex, is the original sign of a creative donation. Therefore, masculinity and femininity, which will be discussed in a later episode, was meant from the beginning to be a gift, a creative and life-giving donation in love. As initiators of the gift, our bodies being designed that way, men must offer the gifts of our masculinity for the good of others. How so? Once again, we turn to Jesus, God who became man to initiate the gift of himself to us. In his male body, he showed us what authentic masculinity is. He used his strength to carry the cross in sacrificial love for us. He gently led the adulterous woman and the woman at the well to recognize the one who alone could satisfy the deepest longings of their hearts for love. He courageously and firmly protected the sanctity of his Father's house by driving away those who desecrated the temple. He humbly came to serve his spouse, the church, and did not demand to be served. So men too are called to live out our masculinity as gifts. With humility and strength, we sacrifice ourselves, especially our pride and our selfishness, as we put ourselves at the service of our wives and work with them for the good of each other, our children, and society. With all our strength, we strive to protect and uphold their dignity and well-being. For this, we need to practice and live the virtues as we continually die to our lust and self-centeredness, which is quite a big problem for us men, right? Or at least for me. And with gentleness and love, we lead others to discover their one true love, Jesus. Now, is this going to be a walk in the park? I'm sure you will agree with me. No way. Experience tells us that living out authentic masculinity is not easy at all. We are hampered by our human weaknesses and the many wounds we carry from our past. We need Jesus. As Pope St. John Paul II reminded us, of which man are we speaking? Of man dominated by lust, or of man redeemed by Christ? Yes, we live our calling to authentic masculinity not by our own strength, but by Him who redeems and sustains us with His grace and mercy. Only then can we repeat and live these words with Him. This is my body given for you. Now this is authentic masculinity as God had planned for us from the beginning. That said, masculinity does not make sense without femininity, and it is the power of the feminine genius that we will explore in a later episode. God bless you and the family always. Bye for now.